He raised the champagne glass with one hand and the envelope with the other. "After today," my father said into the microphone, smiling at 200 relatives and business partners, "there will be no more confusion. She is not my daughter." I was standing 5 feet away from him when the lab technician walked in with a second envelope. And that's when everything changed. If you're listening and this feels personal already, stay with me. And if you connect with stories like this, quiet betrayals, public humiliation, truths that come too late, consider liking and subscribing, only if it feels real to you. Tell me where you're watching from. I always wonder how far silence travels. My name is Ilara Whitman. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I tried to earn a love that was supposed to be automatic. The night my father denied me wasn't the beginning, it was the explosion. The beginning was quieter. I was 8 years old the first time he corrected someone about me. We were at a neighborhood barbecue. I remember the smell of charcoal and sunscreen. A woman from church squeezed my cheeks and said, "She has your smile, Daniel." My father laughed. "Not biologically," he said lightly, flipping a burger, "but she tries." Everyone chuckled. I did too. I didn't understand what he meant. I only knew that something in my chest tightened. My mother, standing beside the lemonade table, went very still. She didn't correct him. She never did. That sentence followed me for years. Not biologically. He said it like a joke, but he repeated it. At school fundraisers, at work events, even once at my high school graduation dinner. "She's complicated," he told his colleagues when someone congratulated him. Complicated. I learned early that I was something he had to explain. My mother insisted everything was fine. She said he had a dry sense of humor, that he didn't mean harm, that families were messy. But children know when they're tolerated instead of loved. At 16, I found the first crack in the story. I was looking for my birth certificate for a summer internship application. The folder in the filing cabinet held my mother's documents, insurance papers, tax forms. My name was on everything, except one form, an old hospital discharge summary. Mother, Rebecca Sloan, father, unknown. My last name was Whitman, my father's last name. I sat on the edge of the hallway carpet for a long time, the paper shaking in my hands. When I asked my mother that night, she cried before she answered. "He adopted you when you were 3, she said. "He promised it would never matter." But it did matter. It mattered to him. And once I knew, I started noticing things I had ignored. The way he introduced my younger brother, Caleb, as my son. The way he never used possessive language with me. The way he signed birthday cards with just his name. No "Love Dad," just Daniel. At 18, I tried confronting him. We were in the kitchen, late. Caleb was asleep upstairs. "Why do you tell people I'm not really yours?" I asked. He didn't look up from his phone. "Because you're not," he said calmly. "That's just a fact." "But you adopted me." "Yes, I did." "Then why—" "Ilara," he interrupted, finally meeting my eyes. "I did what your mother asked. That doesn't change biology." It was the first time I understood something clearly. He hadn't chosen me. He had chosen her, and I was part of the agreement. From that day, something shifted inside me. I stopped trying to impress him. I stopped volunteering for family photos. I stopped waiting for approval. But I didn't stop hoping. Hope is stubborn like that. By 25, I had built my own life. I worked in biotech research in Boston. I paid my own rent. I rarely went home. Then my father announced he was hosting a retirement gala. 200 guests, business associates, extended family. He asked me to attend. "I want the family there," he said over the phone. "It's important." Family. I almost laughed. But I went. I wore a navy dress, simple, professional. My mother hugged me too tightly when I arrived. Caleb barely made eye contact, and my father looked triumphant. There was a banner with his name in gold script, a slideshow of his career milestones, not one picture of me. Midway through his speech, he started talking about legacy. "Legacy is blood," he said, pacing slowly across the stage. "It's continuity. It's knowing who carries your name forward." Caleb shifted beside me. Then my father lifted a white envelope. "For years," he continued, "there have been whispers, questions. Tonight, I end them." My stomach dropped. He opened the envelope deliberately. "I took a DNA test, and as expected, she is not my daughter." Laughter rippled, nervous, confused. My mother stood up. "Daniel, stop." But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, like I was a problem finally solved. That's when the ballroom doors opened. A woman in a lab coat walked in holding another sealed envelope. And that's when everything I thought I understood about my life cracked open. The room didn't go silent immediately. First, there was confusion, chairs scraping, someone whispering, "Is this part of the program?" The lab technician didn't look confused. She looked irritated. She walked straight toward the stage, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, and said into the microphone, "Mr. Whitman, there's been a processing error." My father stiffened. "I believe I already received the results," he said coolly. "Yes," she replied, holding up the second envelope, "but those were incomplete. This is the corrected report. We needed to deliver it directly." 200 people leaned forward. I stood frozen. My mother's hand found mine. Her grip was trembling. Daniel Whitman thrived on control, on certainty, on orchestrated narratives. This event had been carefully curated: music, lighting, the dramatic reveal. This wasn't in his script. He hesitated before taking the envelope, and for the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "Open it," someone called from the back. He didn't respond. He slid it open slowly, jaw tight. The technician didn't leave. She stayed beside him, watching. He unfolded the paper. I watched his eyes move, left to right, then stop. He swallowed. His confidence drained in real time, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. The microphone was still on. "Is there a problem?" a board member asked from the front table. My father didn't answer. The technician stepped closer to the microphone. For clarification, the initial test only measured one marker. The full analysis confirms paternal relation with 99.98% certainty. A murmur moved through the room. I felt like the floor shifted. "Meaning," she continued, "Ms. Ilara Whitman is biologically Mr. Daniel Whitman's daughter." The silence that followed was not theatrical. It was heavy, thick, real. My father stared at the paper like it had betrayed him personally. "That's impossible," he whispered, but the microphone caught it. The room heard it. My mother began crying, not loudly, not dramatically, just relief. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even breathing properly, because something inside me had just collapsed. He had spent my entire life distancing himself from me, mocking the idea that I was his, and now science was saying something else, something that made the last 28 years feel like a cruel misunderstanding or a deliberate lie. "Daniel," one of his colleagues prompted gently, He folded the paper, then unfolded it again. The technician spoke once more. The initial result was incomplete due to a clerical error in the sample labeling. We sincerely apologize for any confusion. Confusion. That word floated above us like a joke no one understood. My father lowered the microphone. He didn't apologize. He didn't correct his statement. He didn't look at me. Instead, he said, "We'll discuss this privately," and walked off stage. Just like that. No retraction, no explanation. 200 people left in stunned fragments, conversations buzzing, phones already lighting up. My mother pulled me into her arms. "I told him," she kept saying. "I told him." I didn't ask what she meant, because suddenly I didn't want answers. I wanted truth, and I had a feeling the DNA test was only the beginning. When I was 12, there was a night I never forgot. I had a fever, high, 103 degrees. Caleb was asleep. My mother was working late. It was just me and Daniel. I remember lying on the couch, shivering, asking if he could stay in the room. He stood in the doorway. "You're not made of glass. You'll survive." Then he turned off the light. I watched his shadow disappear down the hallway. I told myself it was discipline. Now I wondered if it was distance. After the gala, he avoided me for 3 days. Then he called. "Come over," he said. "We need to talk." Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I was wrong," just talk. I went, because despite everything, I still wanted to understand why a man would reject his own daughter publicly while believing he was justified. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived. The test results were spread in front of him. "I ran the test because your mother confessed something," he said flatly. My stomach tightened. What did she confess? That she wasn't sure. The room tilted slightly. "Sure about what?" "About you," he replied. There it was, the first real fracture. My mother had known something, or thought she did, and instead of protecting me from doubt, she had allowed it to grow inside him for decades. "Why didn't you ask me?" I whispered. He looked up sharply. "Ask you what, if you were mine?" "Yes." His jaw flexed. "Because if you weren't, I didn't want to know." That sentence hurt more than the speech, because it meant something worse than rejection. It meant avoidance. He preferred uncertainty to responsibility. I sat across from him, heart pounding. "Why humiliate me like that?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "Because I thought you weren't mine." Not angry, not defensive, just honest. And that honesty felt colder than any lie. I left without hugging him. Outside, the air felt thin. The corrected DNA result had confirmed what I'd always secretly hoped, but instead of healing something, it exposed something far deeper, a truth neither of them had ever told me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. I didn't go home that night. I drove. No destination, just movement. The kind you need when your thoughts start circling the same question over and over. My mother wasn't sure. Those 4 words kept echoing. Not sure about what? About who my father was? Or about who I was? When I was 14, I overheard my parents fighting behind their bedroom door. I wasn't trying to listen. I had gone downstairs for water, but their voices were sharp, low, tense. "You said it would never matter," my mother whispered. "It matters to me," my father replied. "You promised." "I promised based on what you told me." There was a silence then, a long one, and then something else. "I needed stability," my mother said, "for her." I didn't understand it then. I do now. The next morning, I drove back to their house, not because I wanted to argue, because I needed clarity. My mother opened the door. Her eyes were swollen. She had already been crying. "Come in," she said softly. We sat at the kitchen table. the same table where my father had spread out the DNA results. She didn't pretend. She didn't deflect. She just looked tired. "I was 23 when I met your father," she began, "and I was pregnant." The words didn't shock me. What shocked me was how calmly she said them. "Your biological father was someone I dated briefly. It wasn't serious. When I found out I was pregnant, he disappeared." She swallowed. "I was scared. I was alone. Then Daniel came into my life." "Did you tell him?" I asked. "Yes." "Everything?" She hesitated. There it was. "Not everything," she admitted. I felt something drop inside my chest. "What didn't you tell him?" She looked down at her hands. "That there was a chance." "A chance of what?" "That the timing overlapped." The room went quiet. I felt like I was listening to someone describe a storm from years ago, one that had quietly shaped the coastline of my life. "You weren't sure who my father was," I said slowly. She nodded once. "I thought you were Daniel's. The dates made sense, but there was a small window where I couldn't be certain." "And you never told him?" "I told him I was pregnant from someone else," she said quickly. "But after we started dating, I convinced myself you were his. He believed it too." "Until when?" "Until Caleb was born." That landed differently. "Why?" "Because Caleb looks exactly like him," she whispered. "And you didn't." I sat back. My entire childhood reduced to resemblance. Hair color, jawline, eye shape. "I suggested the adoption," she continued. "I wanted security for you, legally, emotionally." He agreed. But something shifted after Caleb. She looked at me carefully. He started calculating. That word felt accurate. Daniel Whitman didn't operate on emotion. He operated on logic, on risk assessment. If there was a possibility I wasn't biologically his, and Caleb clearly was, then I became optional. "You told him recently?" I asked. "Yes." He asked me directly last year, after a board member made a comment about genetics at a dinner. He wouldn't let it go. "So you told him about the overlap?" "Yes." "And he chose a stage." Tears slipped down her face. "I didn't know he would do that." I believed her. That didn't make it hurt less. "I spent my whole life trying to prove myself to him, and he spent his whole life waiting for confirmation that I wasn't his." She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. There was another memory, subtle, small, but it stayed with me for years. I was 11, school science fair. I won second place. Caleb didn't place at all. That night, at dinner, my father clapped Caleb on the back and said, "We'll get it next year, champ." Then he looked at me. "Don't get comfortable." At the time, I thought he meant, "Don't become arrogant." Now, I wonder if he meant something else. "Don't assume you belong." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked my mother. "Because I didn't want you to doubt yourself." But she had, and he had, and doubt doesn't stay contained. It leaks. It changes the way someone looks at you, speaks to you, withholds warmth from you. The DNA test had proven biology, but biology wasn't the only thing broken. "Does he regret it?" I asked finally. She hesitated. "He's embarrassed," she said. Embarrassed. Not remorseful, not devastated, just embarrassed. The humiliation he intended for me had circled back to him, and that, more than anything, told me something important. This had never been about truth. It had been about power, control over the narrative, control over who counted. I stood up. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To talk to him," I said. "About what?" "About the part that has nothing to do with DNA. Because the deeper wound wasn't whether I was biologically his, it was that he lived as though I wasn't. And that wasn't a lab error. That was a choice." He was in his study when I walked in. The door was half closed. The lamp on his desk was the only light on. It cast a yellow circle across stacks of paper and framed awards. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked braced. "I figured you'd come," he said. I didn't sit down. For once, I didn't shrink to fit the room. "Why did you need an audience?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "It wasn't about the audience." "Then what was it about?" He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced over his stomach. "I needed certainty." "You could have gotten that privately." "I did," he replied. "But by then, it wasn't just about me." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told me there was more. "You were being considered for a board position at the company," he said finally. "Succession planning." I blinked. "I never asked for that." "I know, but people were talking. Investors like family continuity, bloodlines. It matters in corporate optics." "So you needed to confirm whether I qualified?" I asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "I needed to protect what I built." There it was. Not fear of betrayal, not confusion about paternity, protection of image, of legacy. I felt something inside me settle, not with relief, with clarity. "You weren't afraid I wasn't yours," I said slowly. "You were afraid I might be." He didn't answer, but his silence did. If I wasn't his biologically, he could justify keeping me at a distance. It made the emotional gap rational. But if I was, then every cold moment, every subtle exclusion, every public joke would become cruelty. And that would mean something about him. "You humiliated me to protect your reputation," I said. He rubbed his temple. "I didn't expect the correction to come publicly." "That's not the point." His eyes met mine then, sharp, tired. "I built that company from nothing," he said. "Every decision has consequences." "So does every silence," I replied. We stared at each other, not as father and daughter, as two adults finally acknowledging what had been obvious for years. "You treated me like a liability, like a variable in your equation." He didn't deny it. "When Caleb was born," he said quietly, "everything made sense. He was unmistakably mine. There was no question. And I was a question mark. Yes, the honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest." "Do you know what that does to a child?" I asked. He didn't respond. "You grow up trying to earn permanence. You analyze every word, every reaction. You become hyper-aware of rejection." I swallowed. "I built my entire career on proving I belonged in rooms that didn't want me, because I learned that at home." That seemed to land. His shoulders lowered slightly. "When the board mentioned succession," he said quietly, "I panicked." "Because you thought I might replace Caleb?" "Because I thought I might owe you something." The room went still. Not money, not shares, something else. "I never asked you for anything," I said softly. "That's part of it." His voice cracked just slightly. "You never demanded. You just endured." That word hurt in a different way. Because he saw it. He knew. And he chose not to fix it. "When the doubt resurfaced," he continued, "it gave me an out." I nodded slowly. "You preferred the possibility that I wasn't yours over the certainty that you failed me." He looked away. That was the first time I saw shame, real shame. Not embarrassment, not reputational damage, personal shame. "I didn't know how to repair it," he admitted. "You could have started with an apology." Silence again. Long. Heavy. When he finally spoke, it was quieter than I'd ever heard him. "I'm sorry." The words weren't grand. They weren't eloquent. They weren't delivered with tears or dramatics. They were simple and late, but they were real. I didn't rush to accept them. I didn't step forward. I just stood there and let the moment exist. Because forgiveness isn't a reflex. It's a decision.
and I wasn't sure yet what mine would be. Being biologically related doesn't make us close, and not being biologically related wouldn't have excused what you did. He nodded once. I took a breath. There's something you need to understand. He waited. I spent my childhood trying to fit into a story that kept shifting. I'm done doing that. His eyes narrowed slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying your uncertainty shaped me. Your distance shaped me. But it doesn't define me anymore. I stepped back toward the door. You don't get to claim me now because a lab confirmed something, and you don't get to discard me when it suits you. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there, smaller than I had ever seen him. I won't fight you for position, or legacy, or inheritance. If the board ever considers me, it will be because of my work, not your name. I paused. And if they don't, I'm still enough. That sentence felt different. It wasn't for him. It was for me. I walked out before he could respond. Not in anger, in clarity. The DNA test had settled biology, but this conversation had settled something deeper. Belonging isn't inherited, it's chosen. And I was finally choosing myself.
For weeks after that night, nothing dramatic happened. No public reconciliation, no emotional family dinners, no sudden transformation, just space. And for the first time in my life, that space didn't feel like rejection. It felt intentional. My father sent one email to the board clarifying the miscommunication at the gala. It was brief, professional, controlled. He didn't mention me by name, but he didn't deny me either. That was progress. My mother called often, apologizing in small ways, asking if I needed anything. I didn't. Not materially. What I needed wasn't something anyone could hand me. It was something I had to build myself. There's a moment from my childhood that resurfaced during those weeks. I was 10 years old, sitting on the back steps of our house with a book in my lap. It was late afternoon. The sun was low. I remember feeling very aware that I was alone. Not abandoned, just separate. Caleb was inside playing video games with my father. My mother was folding laundry upstairs. And I remember thinking very clearly, maybe I'm not meant to belong here. That thought shaped so much of me. It made me self-sufficient. It made me resilient. But it also made me guarded. The gala had exposed something raw, not just in him, in me, because I realized something uncomfortable. Part of me had always waited for proof. Proof that I was legitimate. Proof that I deserved to stay. The DNA test gave me that proof biologically, but emotionally, it didn't change the years. It didn't rewrite the childhood. It didn't erase the subtle humiliations, the jokes, the distancing, the careful language. What it did do was remove the excuse. For both of us. One Sunday afternoon, I asked him to meet me for coffee. Neutral ground. Public. We sat across from each other like two colleagues navigating a merger. I don't want to pretend everything's fixed, I said calmly. He nodded. I know. But I also don't want to carry resentment forever. He looked tired, older. Neither do I. There was no grand speech, no emotional embrace, just measured honesty. I can't undo how I treated you, he said, but I can choose differently now. That mattered, not because it erased the past, but because it acknowledged it. I'm not going to compete with Caleb, I told him, and I'm not going to perform for your approval. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I wouldn't know what to do with you if you did. For the first time, the humor didn't feel like deflection. It felt human. I set one boundary that day, clear, direct. If you ever question my place in this family again, publicly or privately, I will step away completely. Not angrily, just permanently. He didn't argue. I understand. And I believed him. Not because he had suddenly become perfect, but because he had finally allowed himself to see the damage, and I had finally allowed myself to stop absorbing it. The company eventually did approach me about consulting on a biotech initiative, not as successor, not as a symbolic heir, as a specialist. I accepted on one condition: no public announcements about family legacy, no staged optics, just work. And that felt right. Caleb and I had our own conversation too. Quiet. Awkward. He didn't realize, he admitted. You didn't have to, I said. It wasn't your job to fix it. We're not suddenly inseparable, but we're honest now. And sometimes honesty is enough. My relationship with my mother is softer. She carries guilt. I can see it in the way she watches me now, but I don't punish her for it. We were both navigating uncertainty in different ways. She feared instability. I feared rejection. My father feared vulnerability, and fear makes people small. The gala that was meant to disown me publicly became something else. Not redemption, not triumph, exposure. Of ego, of insecurity, of avoidance, but also of truth. The corrected DNA results didn't create belonging. They revealed how fragile his version of it had been, and how resilient mine had become. I don't know if we'll ever have the kind of relationship that feels effortless. Maybe we won't, but I no longer measure my worth by his certainty. I measure it by my own steadiness, by the fact that I stood in a ballroom full of people and didn't crumble, by the fact that I asked hard questions without screaming, by the fact that I walked away when I needed to and returned only when it was on equal ground. Sometimes people don't know how to love without conditions. Sometimes they confuse biology with ownership. Sometimes they confuse doubt with control. But here's what I learned. You are not defined by someone else's uncertainty, not by their hesitation, not by their silence, not by their public mistakes. You are defined by what you choose after. If this story felt personal to you, tell me what boundary you had to set. Thank you for listening.